This is Rainier Avenue Radio. .world.
Welcome to this week's edition of our Impacts of the Coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities. It's me, Tony B. I am your host, and we're going to be giving you information, of course, on the coronavirus, as we've done since March 13th. I don't know how many weeks that is, but we've done it every week on Friday between 1 to 3. And again, this started out as something that we wanted to do to make sure that our South Seattle community, hence Rainier Avenue Radio, was kept updated about what was happening with this virus. At the time, again, when we initially started, the word was it was something that really only impacted white folks in nursing homes. We knew that wasn't going to be the case, and we talked to folks from our community who this was impacting. We dispelled some of the myths, and here we are mid-October, and it feels like we're in the same place that we were. Maybe we even actually know less than we did previously. And that's part of the problem. This is a new thing. It's a new disease. It's a new virus. We're still trying to figure out what it is. And when I say we, yes, the scientists are trying to figure out what it is, but we as citizens are also trying to figure out what this thing is that is impacting our lives, that we get varying messages on. And then over a period of time, these messages also change. But then that's because they're finding out more and more about the virus. Wow. Where do I start? Here's the thing. I have new information for you. And that's what's critical. So I want everybody to pay attention. Been doing a little research. I have new information for you, information that they're still trying to get the word out to a variety of doctors about, so that they can become aware of what it is that I am about to share with y'all. And see, again, part of the problem is that the virus has been circulating among humans for less than a year. Doctors worldwide are still learning about how what's actually called SARS-CoV-2 acts in patients. Well, a rare COVID complication is showing up in adults after they have the virus. All right, so this is fairly new, so the numbers are still small, and so there's a small sample size. But again, just informing our community and surrounding communities so that you could be aware. It's a thing called MIS-A. All right, remember this term, MIS-A. It stands for multi-system inflammatory syndrome in adults. Multi-system inflammatory syndrome in adults. MIS-A. Now, when this condition was identified in children in the spring, it was called MIS-C, with the C standing for children. And it was something that was only showing up in children. Well, it recently started showing up in adults. Typically, severely ill COVID patients tend to arrive at the hospital because they're having some trouble breathing. That hasn't been the case with MIS-A. MIS-A, adults. A lot of the MIS-A patients report fevers, chest pain, other heart problems, diarrhea, or other gastrointestinal issues, but not shortness of breath. And diagnostic tests for COVID-19 tend to be negative. All right, the tests tend to be negative. Again, these are some of the symptoms that you may have for what, again, I'm calling MIS-A, which is what they're calling it, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in adults. And this is red circular patches, rash on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet. All right, red circular patches, rash on the soles of your feet or on the palms of your hands. Pink eyes, extremely chapped lips. All right, I'll run through those again because this does not, it doesn't seem like it's a respiratory issue, but it is connected, and I'll go into a little bit more detail to COVID-19. Again, the symptoms are red circular patches or rash on the palms of your hands, the soles of your feet, pink eyes, and lips that are extremely chapped. Well, as I said before, most MIS-A patients report fevers, chest pains, and other heart problems, diarrhea, gastrointestinal issues, but not shortness of breath. And the tests tend to be negative. Instead, patients will test positive for COVID-19 antibodies, meaning that you were infected 2 to 6 weeks previously, and never had symptoms. You may have been asymptomatic, and so you didn't know that you have COVID. But what they're finding is this thing that could happen to you again is MIS-A. And again, the definition is multi-system inflammatory syndrome, and the A stands for adults. Again, in the spring, this was something that was showing up in kids, but not showing up in adults. And kids were developing this dangerous inflammation around the heart and other organs, and it was often weeks after their initial infections from COVID-19. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention alerted physicians to MIS-C in May. As of October 1st, the CDC had reported 1,027 confirmed cases of MIS-C, which is the children, with more cases under investigation. 20 children have died from this. Now, just because someone doesn't present the respiratory symptoms as their primary manifestation does not mean what they're experiencing isn't as a result of COVID-19. Again, this is a new disease. And so it hasn't even been a year yet, and we're still finding out what some of the after effects are. Now, I'm not here to debate with you whether you think this is a hoax or whether you think this is only going to affect a few people. At the end of the day, people are dying. We still don't know enough about this virus to really know what the outcomes are. So 10 patients in the CDC report needed to be hospitalized, and this is for the MIS-A, in intensive care units. Some needed to be put on ventilators, and 2 have died. These are folks who were asymptomatic, did not know they had it, and started feeling these other symptoms, tested negative for COVID-19, but tested positive for the antibodies, which means they probably had it 2 to 6 weeks previous to MIS-A in adults. And what's more, the CDC report showed that you're not going to be surprised at this. Members of racial and ethnic minority groups appear disproportionately affected. Nearly all of the patients with MIS-A were African American or Hispanic. That's the kicker. So again, you heard me talk about it at the beginning of the show, where initially folks thought, oh, this happened in Kirkland. This is the epicenter. It's affecting and impacting elderly white folks. We found out very quickly that was not the case. And I'm telling you about something new, MIS, which used to be -C, which is for children because that's the only place it was showing up. Now it's beginning to show up in adults who were asymptomatic, MIS, and it's called -A. And I'm going to run this by you again. The CDC report shows that members of racial and ethnic minority groups appeared to be disproportionately affected by this. Nearly all of the patients with MIS-A were either black or Hispanic. The thing is that there have been too few cases that have been reported to fully understand the underlying mechanisms at play here. You know, with some kind of genetic link possible, COVID-19 has been shown to disproportionately affect underrepresented minorities, probably, though, due to socioeconomic factors and underlying health conditions that raise the risk for COVID-19, you know, like obesity or type 2 diabetes, which do tend to be more prevalent in racial and ethnic minority groups. So I'm going to be giving you some more information. This is just your recent COVID update. And I wanted to make sure that we got the word out about this in advance. Again, it is very early in this process. This is still not, this coronavirus is still not a year of seeing how it impacts in humans. And so they're figuring this out along the way. Now, obviously, what that does for some people is it says, hey, you know, what's really real? And it makes for conspiracy theories. And then people don't have the answers. And then when the scientists change their minds, once they get more information, people start to doubt the science. Well, as we know, there's surges going on all over the place again. And in the Midwest, where it wasn't happening, it has become the hotbed for these new surges. And in places where they thought they had it under control, it's coming back again. And as we go into the fall and winter months, folks have to stay inside. The flu comes back. We're going to find out more. But here's a heads up one more again. And in particular, I'm putting this asterisk in front of it. If you are Black or Hispanic, that you should really be aware of, because these are symptoms that are caused by the coronavirus, that you may have had the coronavirus and been asymptomatic and did not know that you have it. And if you tested, you would have tested negative, but you would have had to get a test for the antibodies, which would show that you had it. And the symptoms that you may be getting, again, for MISA, multi-system inflammatory syndrome in adults, red circular patches on the palms of your hands or on the soles of your feet, pink eyes, and if your lips are extremely chapped, you may have MISA. And this is also deadly. And there is also no cure. And this is also something they are just finding out about right now. Now, many of the patients who have MISA also report fevers. They report chest pain or other heart-related issues, diarrhea or other gastrointestinal issues, but not shortness of breath, not the respiratory issue that is generally associated with coronavirus. So again, this was something that started in kids, and they found this out back in May, and then here we are in October finding out that this also is starting to show up in adults, and that's why it's called MISA. The children one is MISC. Now, there's, again, not a huge sample size for this yet, but again, we know that the illness can be life-threatening, and patients usually have some sort of severe dysfunction of at least one organ, like the heart or the liver. 10 patients needed to be hospitalized for MIS-A in intensive care units. Some needed to be put on ventilators, and 2 have died. We are at the beginning of MISA. Who knows where we are in the timeline for coronavirus? It's me, your host, Tony B. We're going to take a quick break here. Coming up a little bit later, we'll be joined by John Parrott, who's going to talk with us about the King County Airport and how the King County Airport has been impacted by the coronavirus. But one more again, MISA. All right. Some of the symptoms you may be experiencing might be fever or chest pain or heart problems or diarrhea, but you may not be experiencing shortness of breath or what we've been told, because it's what the scientists knew, were the respiratory issues. You wouldn't even test negative if you took the COVID-19. You wouldn't test positive if you took the COVID-19 test. You would test negative. You would have to be tested to find out if you had the antibodies. Then they would know that you actually had COVID-19 and were asymptomatic, because that's how you get MISA. We'll be back More information right after this.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not trying out new wigs and cocktail dresses, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
What is the coronavirus? Coronavirus is affecting people's ability to go unanswered questions about the coronavirus.
What's the deal with
I feel like we're not getting the whole story about the coronavirus. There are several patients at the hospital who are at end of life. What is the coronavirus?
Coronavirus disease 2019, otherwise known as COVID-19, is a respiratory illness that can spread from person to person. Patients with COVID-19 have had mild to severe respiratory illness with symptoms of fever, cough, and shortness of breath. There is currently no vaccine to protect against COVID-19. There is no specific antiviral treatment for COVID-19. If you're concerned and you have symptoms, don't go to urgent care. Call your provider or call the ER or urgent care.
If you don't have anyone's number, call King County's coronavirus line at 206-477-3977. Or if that line is busy, you can try 1-800-525-0127.
This message is a public service announcement of Rainier Avenue Radio.org.
Are you feeling the Seattle squeeze? The Seattle Department of Transportation has an app for that. Dot Maps will let you find where construction is taking place now and in the months ahead, and you can even set up email notifications. Find more info on SDOT's blog or access Dot Maps at streetwork.seattle.map.
On Rainier Avenue Radio.world, look for the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show. I'm Dennis Weaver, your good food guide and host, helping you to feel good and look good, and who wouldn't want some of that? All that and more from the Change Your Food, Change Your Life show on Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Stories, songs, and guests. Begin living the organic good food life, and the rest of your life just may be the best of your life. Oh, what's up, baby? To your help.
This could be the most important 30 seconds of the year. That's how long we have to convince you that you have power. Want change in your local community? Vote. Tired of government not working for you? Vote. Done with people saying nothing can be done? Vote. Finished with protests falling on deaf ears? Vote. Fed up with elected officials' empty promises? Reclaim your power and vote them out. You can't win if you don't play, and will never win if you don't vote. For more info, go to reclaimyourvote.org.
Brought to you by your local urban league.
This is the news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Play areas and adult fitness equipment reopened for public use at all Seattle city parks Tuesday, following updated public health guidance. Per Patch.com, all city playgrounds closed in late March as the state first enacted wide restrictions on public activities to curb the coronavirus's spread. Fitness areas and playgrounds are not regularly sanitized, and it's important to follow public health guidance to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and keep parks open for use. We highly recommend that you go to patch.com or the Seattle City Government's website for a full list of details on how to keep yourself safe in these areas. Officials plan to reopen parking lots at city parks on Monday, October 19th.
And that's your news on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Kind of nonsense conversation are we having here?
The Neon Ghost Show. The Neon Ghost Show. Right here on Rainier Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
Right about now.
Rainier Avenue Radio.world. I'm so tired. I have to pee.
What up, y'all? DJ Dirty Harry hanging out with my guys at Rainier Avenue Radio.world. Check them out.
Welcome back to Rainier Avenue Radio.world's live impacts of the coronavirus on South Seattle and surrounding communities. If you are just joining us a little bit earlier prior to the break, I was sharing information about a new discovery, if you will, in the world of the coronavirus. Again, because we live in two different Americas with two different economies, we're also having two different recoveries, and people are experiencing the coronavirus in a couple of different ways. If you want to look at an extreme example, the president of the United States of America was COVID positive. The treatment that he got is not the treatment that really anybody else in the world is going to get. Not just you, the average citizen, or you, the person who is living below the poverty line, not even you who are upper middle class, not even if you're wealthy. The president got a very unique treatment, but that's an extreme level. Again, if you have health care, if you have a place where you can isolate, if you have, bottom line is if you're wealthy, you recover from the coronavirus more often than people who are not, which is why when you look at, the different aspects of our society, systemic racism comes into play. So all of a sudden we've been hearing it once again about systemic racism and the connection to the coronavirus because of all the things that are impacted that we go through. These things disproportionately affect and impact more people of color in our society, like, say, for example, health-related issues. Before the coronavirus, 1 out of 4 African Americans died waiting for health care. Waiting for health care. 25% of African Americans died waiting for health care. That's what's meant by systemic oppression, health disparities, and why what I'm talking about again right now is so critical. We'll see what happens. It may evolve into nothing, but we're giving you a heads up on it right now because it's impacting Black and Hispanic communities more than it is anyone else. And again, it's MISA. If you have it, it's COVID related, but if you get tested for COVID, it's going to come back negative, not positive. You have to get tested for the antibodies. And it is deadly. And again, some of the things that may be associated with getting MISA are you might see or experience red or circular patches on the palms of your hands and the soles of your feet, eyes that are pink and lips that are extremely chapped. You may have to tell your doctor that you need to be tested for the antibodies because apparently this is not information that even all doctors know about yet. Some of the other symptoms, fevers, chest pain, heart problems, diarrhea, but not shortness of breath. And again, if you were tested for COVID-19, the tests tend to be negative. And again, just because someone doesn't present with respiratory problems as their primary manifestation does not mean that they're not experiencing something that is a result of COVID-19. And yes, this can be life-threatening. Patients who get this usually have some kind of severe dysfunction of at least one organ, like the heart, which you don't want to have a dysfunction in your heart, or the liver. You don't want to have a dysfunction of your liver either. 10 patients in the CDC needed to be hospitalized and put into intensive care units. Some needed to be put on ventilators. 2 have died. And again, here's the kicker. The CDC report shows that members of racial and ethnic minority groups appear to once again be disproportionately affected. Nearly all of the patients with MISA were African American or Hispanic. There's not a large enough sample size, to really make a determination yet. And again, it's MISA, which stands for multi-system inflammatory syndrome in adults. So there's inflammation that's going to be happening inside of your body while you're experiencing all of these other things. We're going to have John Parrott coming up from King County in a bit. I want to tell you a little bit, though, about what we've got going on. Don't forget that tonight, a little bit later on at 5 o'clock, we'll have our candidates debate for Supreme Court Justice, and that will be Judge Dave Larson and the candidate Justice Raquel Montoya Lewis, who is the incumbent. That will be tonight. from 6 to 7. Again, we're just trying to give you information so that you can be a more informed voter. It's your vote. You get to use it however you want to. And although a lot of the air is getting sucked out of the room by the presidential election, these down ballot candidates are things that you have control over that impact closer in your community. So we're hearing now about a Supreme Court justice position, but there's also a Supreme Court justice in the state of Washington. And position 3, you get to vote on. This is not appointed by the Senate. So you get to vote on this. So before you cast that ballot and you just check off a name, here is your opportunity to find out more about where these candidates stand, how they may rule, what they've ruled on in the past. That's tonight, Supreme Court Justice position number 3, Dave Larson, candidate, and then the incumbent, Justice Raquel Montoya Lewis. And then on Monday, the 37th Legislative District 37th Legislative District 37, position 2. That's Shakundi Salisbury and Kirsten Harris Talley. That's at 7 o'clock, and that debate will be taking place right here on Rainier Avenue Radio as well. We'll be back to talk more with our next guest, who is going to talk about King County Airport and how it's being impacted by COVID-19 right after this.
Rainier Avenue